And Harsha had joined me in the real estate business, helping out with all the administration. And like I said, it did not work out. And I think I don't even know how long it lasted, maybe 6 months to a year, until we decided that this was not going to work, especially if we wanted to stay together. And but interestingly enough, like everything that Harsha shared with you, I always knew that real estate, even though I enjoyed doing parts of it and I knew I was good at it.
Harsha and Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the first time I'm doing a podcast with two people, and you're a couple, so that'll be fun. Yeah, I'd like to dive into your personal experiences, how you work together, and how all of that works. So you can take turns, decide who's going to speak first. I might address one of you individually or both, but whoever would like to speak is fine. So, yeah, can you maybe share your story on how your Revive community came to be?
So, how our Revive community came to be is I I went through a transition with my work and my purpose several years ago, and really found deconstructed everything in my life, and then found a path that felt a lot more true to me, and started doing the work for myself, which was, realizing a lot of things that just needed work internally, and also being someone who's always looking for how I can serve others. I also simultaneously was doing this work that I was doing with myself in helping others with it as well. And it was really lovely to have Aaron at the time being a provider for us, for me to have that space to completely go into that path and not have to worry about anything else except just what my focus was, which was myself, my health, my realignment, and then how I could make this into something that could serve others. And along the way, as this was happening, we would have conversations, and Aaron would share with me, although he was really good at what he was doing, which was real estate at the time, his heart wasn't in it. And as he was witnessing me on my journey, there was something inside of him saying like, what could it be like for me, for him to also be doing his heart's work, something that he could really like get behind, also being someone who is here to serve and help others. But his role and his life at that point hadn't yet given him the opportunity to do that. And so once I got my feet under me, and once I started to feel like, okay, what I'm doing is picking up momentum, we took another basically leap of faith where Aaron said, I mean, we've been doing a lot of work together as well. It's not like it was just me. We were together doing a lot of this work. But my role was allowing me to like go into a path that was like off the beaten path, and like into the kind of, I call it like the cave, and do the work that I needed to, whereas he still had to show up for like the work, even though we were really learning and growing a lot internally. And so it came down to taking a leap of faith where we realized like, hey, let's do this. Like Aaron's ready. He knows what he's meant to do is not real estate anymore. He's meant to serve men, and a lot of the work, I'll let you speak to more of that. But essentially how that came to be is we sat down and we looked at, okay, we've together in the 10 years we've been together, have been a part of so many communities of personal growth. And we've really like explored every avenue of what that looks like for people who are doing it really, really well in their own capacity. And so we sat down and it's like, okay, well, here's what we are about. Here's what we've learned from these great teachers and these great communities we've been a part of. And also, we can identify some pieces that for us were still missing in those. So we just kind of sat down and said, like, how can we create what would feel really good for us, and also is, in alignment with what we both want to do. And so that birthed Revive Community, basically. That's how it came to be.
That's amazing. It's very rare to find two people that are following this path. I've also been to a lot of workshops, and very seldom are the men present. The wives are changing and growing and learning and healing, and the men are being left behind. And not to say it's always the case. Sometimes they're men, but for the most part, I think it's more of a traditional thing that women do. I know if they go online, they look for help with relationships. Men go online to look for other kind of help that we won't discuss here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so how was that as a business, as a couple, building a business together? Because obviously, life looks rosy on the outside.
Well, that's a very interesting question because we actually tried to work together in the past. And it was probably one of the most difficult and most challenging years of our lives. That was when we actually had first gotten married. It was the first year of marriage, the first year we had moved into our new home together. And Harsha had joined me in the real estate business, helping out with all the administration. And like I said, it did not work out. And I think, I don't even know how long it lasted, maybe 6 months to a year, until we decided that this was not going to work, especially if we wanted to stay together. And but interestingly enough, like everything that Harsha shared with you, I always knew that real estate, even though I enjoyed doing parts of it and I knew I was good at it, it wasn't something that was meant for me to be doing for the rest of my life. And I didn't know what was going to come of, what we're doing now together, but I just had true faith and belief that that time would come. And through life's experiences and, just with the way we were guided, we were able to come together in this space now. And it was separate, with the work that she was doing, and the work that I was doing. And I just saw how much specific men needed the work just like I did at some point. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And it brought us to this space now where we're working together and it just feels so right, where it wasn't that way in the past. And so, through our experiences with one-on-one coaching, somatic healing with breath work, sound baths, and everything. We just sort of combined everything, like Harsha had mentioned. It's like, what are our gifts that we've been taught or learned from, and bringing it to the community now, and that's how it all sort of came together.
Yeah, we're still figuring it out,
Yeah.
we're there's a lot of things that we are like, this is very clear. And then as we're learning to work together again and growing a business, it's like we're figuring out some new things and finding our way through it. So it's yeah, it's a lot of like trial and error, seeing what works, believing that we're, meant to do this work, and that it's already like we already know what we're here for, and that this isn't meant to be like a destination. It's the journey of this building and growing is the business in itself. And we, our work is a lot in helping not only couples, but people see that the relationship to self and relationship to one another really goes hand in hand. And so as we're learning about relating to ourselves in a new way, we learn to relate to one another in new ways. And that is the purpose of it all. Like, it's not about it. There's not really ever a point where you're like, this is it. As soon as that happens, it's like, oh, there's another door to explore. There's another place to go. So right now I'd say like our business is kind of like a toddler, right? Like we picked it up off the ground. It's a toddler at this point where we're figuring out what's working, we're growing, and really like who we are at home as a family is who we are in our business. And we're like finding a way to make that like a whole, kind of like part of the whole of us, versus like compartmentalizing it into things, but then also having like the clarity on, okay, where are we now? What are we doing here? And making a business grow from this place. Yeah, it's that's pretty much it. It's just like trial and error and a journey that we're like here for and are committed to.
Nice. Yeah, I know sometimes you need to do what you don't want to do to know what you do want to do.
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so obviously it wasn't working. You had a pivotal insight or a moment or an experience. What was that?
When it wasn't working.
When your real estate and you working together wasn't working. And obviously if it's not your life path and it's not in alignment with what you're doing, it's never going to be bringing you real satisfaction. So there must have come a time that one of you said, you know what, I need to do XYZ. What was the catalyst actually? That's more
Yeah,
important.
Mm.
I think because this was about 7 years ago, we actually had a business coach at that time, and she expressed to us that, there's a very small percentage of couples that can work together. And,
Yeah.
that maybe where we were at just wasn't meant to be in that way. And at that time, we got married that year. We moved into our own house. We moved our office into the basement. So there was days and days that like sometimes we never left the house, or like Harsha would get out of the house for days. And so when we hit that point where we knew that something needed to change and we were advised by our coach, we said, okay, we need to separate as far as working together, working with one another. And for her at that time, she was focusing on her breath work. So she was focusing on that. And at that time, I had moved my office outside of the house back into a commercial space. And I think that's what allowed us to continue our own paths together and come back with one another. Is that was sort of the point. But what I realized is also I was when I was working in real estate, I was just so entangled in the energy and the clients always being available 7 days a week, all times of the day and night, is that I carried the business with me around at all times. And it was hard for me to shut that off, especially when we were working on the business together, because it's all we knew. Even after the fact, it was still very tough for me to let that go. Where what we're doing now, I feel like the reason why it flows is because who we're being in our family life is exactly who we are in the work that we're doing. There's no change. We don't need to turn it off or shut it off. It's like we are being who we are for ourselves as well as all of the clientele that we have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah. For me, it was health. Like I started to notice my health kept I just kept having like fainting, and like I just felt like I didn't have energy, like I just wasn't myself in terms of my vitality. And the business was one aspect of that. Like it was a manifestation of the stuff that was calling for me to like, hey, look here, look here. And then when that shift happened that Aaron's talking about, where we're like, okay, this is a decision we need to make that is not happening, moving the office out, then it allowed me to like kind of wake up to see like, okay, I need to focus on something here that I haven't been focusing on yet. And that was the catalyst for me, was my health in a big way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I often wonder what it is because for everyone it's different. There's like a point of no return where you realize something's got to shift. And I know your body carries your story, so it's going to tell you. So how's your health changed since then?
Oh, it's I mean, I'll give you like the most practical example, right? Like I used to be somebody that lived on chocolate, like sweets. Like I would not eat very much. And like I would go maybe eat like one meal in a day. And my fuel source was like sugary things, like little snacks and stuff like that. And it now, like if I eat a piece of chocolate, like and someone offers me another piece, I'm just like, oh, like I can't. Like that literally my body's like, no, thank you. I just don't feel good with that in my system. I pretty much only eat dark chocolate if I do eat chocolate. So that's just, I know it seems like such a small thing, but that's like my entire gut has completely like purged out a relationship to a certain, I guess, way of being that used to be so normal for me. But now it's a whole new normal, and just feels so much better to be in this place, to be honest.
Yeah, I
And
think we tend to be addicted to the thing that we're allergic to.
mhm,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
It can be true, I guess. Mhm.
So you do plant medicine as well. How does that factor into your healing journey?
How does doing plant medicine impact or affect my healing journey or healing journey?
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, it's it's really brought the work that for me, I'm going to speak for myself personally, the work that I had begun doing, which was more mental, emotional. And I know it's all connected, right? Body, mind, heart. It's like it's all one, but it was more heavily on like the intellectualizing of it before and practicing through a way of like it was more like an emotional thing. Plant medicine just brought all of that, which was already starting to come online for me, and like brought it into these spaces into my physical body that were completely in my unconscious. Like I had no awareness that these aspects of me even existed. And the plant medicine became like a facilitator for me. The way I facilitate space was the way I was facilitating space for others with breath work and connecting to self, that the plants help me facilitate me connecting to myself at a level like, oh, okay. And I got to see how the timing, because they say, right, like the plants have their own consciousness, they speak to us, they connect with us. So it's like they were always there, just waiting for me to get to a certain point in my awareness of self. And then it was like this magnet that they just like pulled me in, because I was then able to like listen to that calling and then follow that sort of hint, that intuitive pull, meet with the plant medicine, and then receive this like beautiful facilitation from these very, very powerful spirit um, plants, and like learn and get to know like, okay, wow. And it became an embodiment. Now it's not even doing anything. It's more like a being of myself and trusting, just like the plants kind of are. And then when things need to be done, I can bring in the other aspects of the tools that I had beforehand and like apply it. The baby is calling. I'm just gonna go handle him for a moment.
Sure.
Would you like to continue or wait till she comes back?
Let's wait.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, plants are powerful, I tell you. And they kind of stay with you in your system.
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like integration with the plants happens months, even years afterwards. I feel like Harsha and I were even just talking about it because my last ceremony was in February, and I've been doing them regularly, ayahuasca specifically, every year for the last 3 years. And at this point, I feel like I'm still integrating what I learned in February. So I'm not actually ready to sit with the medicine again at this point. So it definitely like stays connected with us for quite some time. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have different experiences with ayahuasca? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously different memories, but like some people have trauma and others have these bliss experiences.
Yeah, so when I first did ayahuasca, I went to Colombia to do it, and I did that on my own. And that was we were actually supposed to do it together, but after we had registered to sign up to go to do it, Harsha found out that she was pregnant. So it ended up just myself going on my own to do it, and that was its own experience. And then we had the opportunity to do it again together in Texas a year later. And when we had gone there, because I had already done it, I thought, you know what? I've already done 3 ceremonies. I know exactly what I'm walking into. And oh my God, like the medicine showed me, like, it was one of those, where you get caught in that loop and that pattern and you can't get out. And so it definitely was a different experience. And then again, when I did it last year in February, it wasn't that dark, really dark type of ceremony. However, it was like in between. So every time I've done it, it's actually been very different. And so I've learned that, the medicine will meet you wherever you need to be met. And you can't really have any expectation, even your intention. Of course, we always go in with intention, but sometimes there's other messages for us to receive at that time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that because I wouldn't say that it amplifies where you're at right now because it brings up stuff you weren't thinking of at all.
That's
But
true.
if you're at a certain frequency, it might amplify that.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I said it meets you where you're at, because I feel like consciously we don't know what we need to move forward and to evolve.
Mm.
So when it meets us where we're at, because it'll take us back, even though it's consciously we don't think that that's where we need. It's like it will take us to a space where we need to have that breakthrough or that healing or that transformation for us to move forward. And that's what I feel for myself, at least in my experience. So yeah, I understand what you mean when it's like not always, because consciously sometimes it's not the same thing.
Yeah. We were just discussing how ayahuasca can differ from one experience to the next.
Yeah, yeah.
How is what?
He was asking about how my experience from ayahuasca, how has it been different or the same
Got it, got it.
experience, so I was just sharing with her.
Yeah.
So I completely forgot the question. I know you finished answering it. What was the question that you just
Does
asked?
plant
Well,
medicine affect the work that we're doing now?
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yeah.
yeah. So I know that ayahuasca, they call it the vine of the dead. Do you literally like feel like you step through a doorway, like into another like portal, something?
Yeah.
Mm,
For
Vine of the
me,
dead. I've never heard that before, actually. Never
yeah.
heard it called that before. But it makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, plant medicine and ayahuasca specifically, um, what it has done for me is sort of brought me back to myself. So it really allowed me to peel layers of myself that I consciously thought I was. And it let me go back within. So when you refer to it as, you said the night of the dead, right?
The vine of the dead.
Oh, the vine of the dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like a part of me, every time I've done ceremony, a part of me has died. And I've had to let go of that. And the medicine, or actually all plants in general, I feel like it's fast tracked my growth, my healing, my transformation. But I also know that with the plants, it's just like an opening or a pathway for us to really learn more about ourselves. It's not like you take it and it changes it. You really have, it really is a devotion afterwards from taking the medicine after you've received the messages that have been given, and for you to move forward with the inner work for yourself to have a transformation.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you think the environment in which you take it also affects the way it works in your system? Like if you don't feel safe or you don't know the people around you.
Yeah, I think set and setting with anything really will make a difference, right? And then this plant goes so deep that it's going to definitely bring up if you have even a little bit of an apprehension in any part of you, then you're going to meet that. But I love the question. I want to, like, I had an answer coming through is it's interesting that it's called the vine of the dead because in my journey, it's actually helped me connect to the essence of motherhood more deeply and the womb. And it's so interesting because now, I mean, I had a concept of this and I get it, right? Like death and life are actually two sides of the same coin. And so when you can have a relationship with the dead or death, that's when you can actually really have a relationship with life and even like birthing and creating. Um, and it's like really part of like the cycle where those two meet is like the death is where like birth comes right in. And I could like go into a whole journey of how that like that looked for me, but it like that plant actually in practical life, although the ceremony is like dark, done in the nighttime, and yes, takes you through kind of like a portal. I guess you could call it a doorway to it's to a certain degree. For me, coming out of those, then being more connected to my womb, which is that dark space within the woman's body, it helped me actually show up in a way of honoring life from that space more with more connection, with more presence, with more intention than beforehand. So yes, like it's a really like a contrast way of living better is by getting like really intimate with death. So I love that you just shared that it's called the Vine of the Dead, because I'd never heard that. And I'm like, yeah, actually, but I can see how it works that way.
Yeah. I always feel like you have to have an ego death to transcend, because you can't stay who you are if you want to be somebody else.
That's right.
Yeah. What was also interesting, I did ayahuasca once. Um, the facilitator was singing, and she came to sing over me. And when I looked at her, she literally looked like a skull with hair, like you see in the Mexican, those shrunken heads.
Yeah.
And I knew I was not seeing the real person. I was hallucinating it. But it's also interesting because apparently she's called the Lady of the Dead, and
Yeah.
she's like the goddess of the underworld or something. And there are people that do see that. So yeah, I was quite fascinated because I never, and they've got the, like the, what do they call them? Harvey, those pictures with the roses and the skulls.
Yes,
Where
yes.
does that come from? Somebody must have
Mhm.
seen it somewhere down the line.
Yeah,
Totally.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Life.
Yeah,
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back to family dynamics because I'm fascinated with the two of you working together.
Mhm.
So, what are the most common challenges that you see in dysfunctional family dynamics as a couple? Like, because obviously you're coming from a different background, your partner's coming from a different background, and they're playing out each other's trauma.
Yeah. I think for me, what I see coming into this with the family dynamics, um, is one is the belief systems that when two people are coming together, is that they're coming together from two very different, sometimes it's different cultures, different family beliefs, different countries, different, there's so many differences. So it's like the belief systems that they're coming together with. That's probably the one place where I first see a difference in couples coming together. The other area is just communication. I feel that a lot of couples, they don't know how to allow their partner to be able to be felt like they've been seen and heard, and which allows them the safety to be fully expressed. And because they don't know how to communicate or the right communication styles to connect with one another in that way, it really creates dysfunction amongst them. And so I think those are the two biggest things for me when I see couples come together that they have challenges is one, the way they think, so the belief systems that they have, and two is their communication styles of how they can connect with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard, everyone has their own version of trauma, little t, big T that they call, right? So we all come into any relationship, but it's like the most amplified in our partnership, our marriage couple, ones that we're creating life with. And I'm getting like, for some reason, I want to share like, it's like this concept of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So in anything in life, but especially in marriage, when you've found yourself kind of trying to solve a certain problem, which tends to happen, we cycle through, right? And even when we're clearing through, we kind of cycle through the same things with the moon, with our bodies. Are we doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result? Or are we actually present enough to see, like, oh, right, there's something dysfunctional here happening. And maybe we don't know what the next thing to do is to solve it, but we just know that doing the thing that we have been doing so far isn't working for us. And that creates a space then to then like, well, it just creates a space, which is what we most of the time just need, first of all, in order to start another journey, to take another path, is like that breath to say, okay, this is what's been, we bring some awareness into it. And then, some awareness of like, oh, maybe there's some things that have happened in our lives that are impacting how we're showing up, where the way I'm seeing something and the way you're seeing something, even though we're looking at the same thing, we're somehow seeing totally different things. Like, what is this about? And that obviously every relationship with every couple, you can see it present on some degree because it goes so deep. Like this stuff starts from like how we're birthed even into the world by our parents. And like Aaron was saying, we all have a different set of parents. And so even if our parents are from the same town, the same place, the fact that they're two separate, like four different people means we're going to come into our relationship with completely different like blueprint dynamics of how we're going to show up. And so I think how to like the dysfunction is kind of there for everyone on some degree, but it's what are we doing are we even noticing that it is dysfunctional in the first place? And then not judging it, but just going, okay, how can we make this functional? How can we take away the dis out of it and just function with this? And then knowing that this is a journey and it goes so deep with this work that we'll have something else that may come up later on where we're looking at something else and we realize, oh, we're looking at it a totally different way. Okay, what's going on here? And the more we can have this framework, the less we show up as a dysfunctional family, the more we show up as a functional family. It's just having that awareness of like, all right, this is what's happening. And then having some lightheartedness about it and like, you know, like for me, I used to take things very, very seriously, and I'm learning through our relationship to like lighten up a little and like to like be able to have a little bit more of a joking side and a fun side. Whereas like for me with my upbringing, that wasn't really present, and I'm learning that from him. And I'm sure you're learning a lot from how I operate that wasn't present for you, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I find it takes some courage to step back and get your emotions out of it and look at it objectively. Do you think attachment styles have got a lot to do with that as well?
Yeah. Yeah, they probably do. They do. They tend to like, right? Our attachment style will bring in the person with the exact opposite, and like that ends up being what they call like the trauma bonds, right? Where you're bonding
Yeah,
through the trauma versus the right.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that we all call in our partner. And like Harsha had mentioned, is when we can get to a point where there's awareness around what we are experiencing with one another, and we can take a step back and sort of realize that, who our partner is, they are living in their truth. Because why would they live any other way? And you know what? I'm living in my truth, and that's where the difference between the two are. And
yeah,
if we can see that and create awareness around that, that's when we can start coming together and start working together with one another to grow with one another and also start to unravel. It's just like the plant medicine. A relationship is medicine for each one of us if we choose to use it in that way. And so when we start to unravel things, we start to begin to see, you know what? This is actually not who I am or who I thought I was. And then we learn that in the reflection of our partner, right? They're a mirror for us at times. And so when we're able to see that and create awareness around it, that's when we're able to get past, what our attachment styles are, what our belief systems are that are coming together, and we can move closer together with one another and grow from there.
Yeah.
yeah.
The emotions are important. It's important. You're very correct in that like it takes courage to not have like but I want to like just really emphasize it's not about not having the emotions because the emotions are what make life life, right? It's like we want to be able to actually have the emotions present, but that's not be where we're making our decisions from and that not be
Correct. Yeah.
where we're showing up from. It's like we can go through it, come back to the center where the emotions are not like actively like in our space and then communicate from that and it can be so subtle and it can be so obvious, right? And like it's when we're working on just not having emotions, what we can end up doing is suppressing them and holding them back, and then actually not being very honest about what we're actually feeling. And then that in itself becomes the emotion speaking for us in an unconscious way, versus can we clear the emotion, make it conscious, and then transcend that and then communicate from that place, having like got what we needed to from that emotional expression. And
Mm.
so it's work, and the attachment styles, it all comes down to like what we're sharing. It's like when we start to just have that pause and that break to say, why are things not working, and like how come this is happening, even though, like Aaron said, like we chose one another, we're in this as a choice. So like we're up against something. This is for us, we face this, every couple faces this, is like, okay, so that starts to get us curious. And in that curiosity, then we can start learning, oh, I heard this thing called attachment styles. What's yours? What's mine? Lately, we've been talking finances, and we've learned about 4 different archetypes of financial ways of being. And so we go, well, wait, this is mine, this is yours. And even just having that type of conversation can start to move the needle forward towards more harmony and like more of like a coherence versus whatever tends to happen for people when that's not present, you know?
Yeah. So there might be some people watching saying, that's very nice, but that's not happening in my relationship. Maybe they've got a partner who's just stuck and refuses to budge.
Yeah.
What would happen in that situation? What advice would you give that person?
Well, I would ask them to define what they mean by stuck and refusing to budge, right? And who we're talking to. If we're talking to one partner speaking about the other partner, saying they're stuck, they're not budging, right? So there's so many different parts we would look at. Because if usually, like I had mentioned, our work is very much about bringing it all to like, how is this a mirror? How is your relationship with your partner actually a mirror to you yourself?
Mhm.
And so this can be a really hard truth to swallow. And this is also why very many people are like, oh yeah, that seems nice, but how come it's not happening? Well, there's probably like a spoonful of your own medicine that you need to take first to like get that what you're saying about your partner, you're actually saying about yourself. And when you can look at that, and then as much as there's that ego resistance to be like, no, 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 it's not, I'm doing all the things, and they're not. I can tell you as someone like, we spoke about it. I went on this path, like I got to have this awakening earlier. I was in that for a bit saying like, oh, like, how come, like I'm doing this. But then every single time, because I knew the truth is actually is a mirror for me. So what am I actually doing here, and what's in me? And it comes down to like really subtle energies when we take the work deep enough.
Mhm.
But just that switch of like, it's actually not about them. It's not about your partner. Let's look at you and you. Where in your life are you possibly stuck and not budging?
Mhm.
Even if it's not in a relationship dynamic, like maybe in relationship you're flowing, but there must be somewhere in your life that you're stuck and not budging. And that dynamic in you is now being projected or showing up where you're looking at your partner and saying that's happening there. And so it's very nuanced, but also very practical of like, it's not about them, it's about you. And it's happened in my life, and I've seen it in my clients too. It's like, oh, okay, they have that. They have a little bit of time to integrate that. And they come back and it's like, you know what? Like somehow it's like my partner just had this, like, I don't know what, they've changed. They're like a different partner. It's like, okay, well, I wonder how did that happen? And it's happened for me where I'm like, oh, Aaron seems like he's changed. It's like, no, I had a shift. And it's happened in return
Oh, yeah,
too, where he's like, things have where he was seeing things in me, and then he made a shift in himself, and it's like, oh, now it's not even an issue anymore. So
Yeah.
that's how I would speak to anyone who's in that space.
I love
And
that you say that, because everybody is a mirror. But as soon as you make it about you, it's empowering. You're no longer the victim.
Mhm.
100%.
Exactly,
100%.
exactly. And we must know that we are the creator, right? So we are creating everything that we're experiencing in this lifetime. So that's why we see in a relationship, there's people that always blame it on their partner. And those are the same type of people that will leave a relationship and join the next relationship, and they'll encounter the same dynamics in their new relationships. Uh, because they haven't actually owned up and understood that where everything was happening was actually from where they were coming from.
Mhm.
And so that's why you also see that common trend where people go from partner to partner to partner and nothing changed. There's a common denominator there, but they don't see it. Right.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it's a lot of like that empowerment is huge in it. And then from that place, because you're vibrating at that level, the partner will have no other choice but to either if they're just say they are actually where they are and they aren't making a shift, then whoever we're working with can look and say, well, why am I still with this person then? Like if it really is this, then what about me is choosing a person that's like this? Versus then if that partner is actually really has potential and possibility, they will make the move and it will become like a, you can grow together versus it feeling like I'm doing it all and they're not doing anything at all.
Yeah. So you know about the 4B movement?
The for me movement
4B movement.
or B,
Not too
no,
familiar with
can you
that.
tell that?
Well, I'll just catch up a little bit. So, it's all over social media where women are saying they don't want to get married anymore, they don't want to have babies, they don't want to be suppressed by men. Are you seeing a shift in the way women are showing up in the world at the moment?
Mm, mm. So I'm curious, why is it called 4B? Is there a connection to that?
Um, yeah, there was a woman in South Korea. I think it was 2016. She wrote a autobiography about her life, and she said she's never going to be married again because there they were forced to be married and have children, and she was treated really badly. But that autobiography went viral in South Korea, and all these women, and the B is, in whatever language they speak, the B stands for marriage, for birth, for having relations, all that stuff. So they said they all start with a B, and there's four
Um,
B's. So,
got that.
and the women there are all refusing, and because it happened in 2016, there are now no first graders in South Korea in class because no one's having children. The women have just taken a stand and said no more.
Yeah,
And it's a problem because the men are saying, how are we going to get these women to have our children? But they don't want to change.
yeah. Ah, wow, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing, like enlightening me with this awareness. That's a powerful movement. Um,
Yeah.
what I would say, and I'd love to hear like your perspective as a man
Mhm.
on that. But as the woman in this, I mean, firstly, I can understand where they're coming from, right? Like if that's been what's like they've been forced to marry and forced to do these things before they know anything, they just know they've been put on this path. It's it's interesting because as a woman, right? Like what I'm seeing in that is all of those things which are meant to be like a very natural part of life, right? Has kind of been disconnected and become something that you're forced to do something like outside of you before you really get to know yourself. And in the like no more of that, what I don't see present is like instead of that, what we're going to do is actually really, really bring back the connection to ourselves. Like, okay, it's fine. It's okay for a while. You want to say no to this, no to this, no to this, no to this. But what are you saying yes to then? What's your yes? And for women, when we can actually connect to the what is our yes, that can start to bring us back into a connection to ourselves. And that might look like whatever might look like, oh, I enjoy cooking because this is my thing I like to do. I like to draw. I like to have conversations with my girlfriends. And slowly, as we start saying yes, we bring connection back. Because it sounds like what was missing was connection before.
Mhm.
And in marriage, there should be connection. In birthing, there should be connection. Like in life, connection is like the jet fuel that I believe gets things to continue moving forward. And so possibly connection to self was completely lost because they've signed up for a way of life that was very disconnected. And so what I would say is it's okay if that's what the choice is, but then look at how are you bringing connection back to yourself as a woman, and connection to self as a woman is it's like what the world needs most right now.
Mhm.
And from that place, I can speak from my own journey because I went through this myself where I was like, okay, no more of any of that. But then I also got, well, all right, now I can spend this time getting back into myself. And so not like to my surprise, motherhood was the thing I had the most fear around. It was the thing that I was a no to. And like I shared with you, my connection to motherhood is what actually is like my deepest work right now, what I'm the most connected to. Why? Because I got connected to myself. I got connected to my womb, my power center. And the womb is not only here to birth life, that is the main purpose, but the energy of the womb is where we birth everything in this world. And when we as women can come back to I am connected to me, even if that means I'm not married, even if that means I don't have a child, within and around me that is fruitful, that is like something is being created from it. And if we give it enough time, I wouldn't be surprised that women then do open up to like, you know what, like in this space, it would be really nice to have like a man to connect with. Like I have all of this sensuality, I have all of this authenticity, I have all of me, and like the place that I know that that could be like really, really well matched is in like a masculine energy, and like something that holds this structure that can then we can play in this way. Doesn't mean I have to get married or anything like that, but that means I can now open back up to connecting with a man or even just with life in general. So I don't know much detail about what you're saying, but what I'm getting is like there's just been a disconnection from life in total. And we can see it because now there's no kids, there's no life literally coming into the world from that place. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but that's my main point on it. It's like, what are they saying yes to, and can they bring the connection back to themselves? Yeah.
Aaron, what do you think?
And, I agree with everything Harsha just shared. And I understand why a movement like that could take place in today's world. I could see where, the disconnection from the feminine is with themselves, and they just don't feel safe in who they are being and push it, the masculine right away. And what that causes is separation. And we know that one of the highest energies and frequencies that we live in is love and connection. So with the separation, like Harsha had said, maybe this movement, what it'll do is allow them to come back within themselves to see that they can create safety for themselves to be able to allow that. And at the same time, this is a wake-up call for men as well, because men over the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years have been driven a completely different way away from their feminine energy, because we know that everybody contains both energies within them. And we're starting to see it, but not as rapidly as the world would like to see it, that men are starting to connect with their feminine energy and start to come back and be able to learn to balance both of them and show up for the feminine so that they can feel safe and within them, their own feminine energy. So maybe this movement, it might be a catalyst to bringing that separation, taking it away and bringing us closer together again in a way.
Yeah, like how would it be for men who before women were like just like no effort at all, and the woman's your wife and bearing your children, and now that's not an option. But what would happen to a man if he started to see these women like start to really flourish in their own way and like really come back to touch with themselves? Like, what do you think how would that impact a man who before was totally differently?
Like I said, it would be a wake-up call, because they would not know what is going on, and they would have to go back within to see what change has to happen, because we know that what we're craving as well is connection. We're not gonna, you can only go so long away from one another, and women be on their own and men be on their own, but at the end of it, we're gonna have to come back together at some point. So the movement, I understand why it may be happening and how this lady in South Korea that created the movement, what she was feeling. In today's world, it's very apparent, and we see it a lot with women, driving deeper into their masculine energy and pushing away further and further from other men. But at the same time, it could be the movement that brings us back together, is what I see. Because there'll be a learning for both.
Yeah, like men will actually have to like make an effort to like be with a woman like that who's like, whoa, I want that. Like I want her to have my kids, but like how do I even attain that? Like she's so connected to herself, and like she's saying no to me until I am the kind of something that like she would want to have a child with. Like I could imagine that could like raise the frequency and like bring the next generation of children there from like a really, really potent, powerful place. There's potential for that.
It allows men to step into their power and become a high value man, so that they can attract, their partner.
Yeah.
And most likely they'd respect women more too. Because how do you respect someone who's a doormat, who you own, who hasn't got her own belief system, who hasn't got her own choices?
Totally. Absolutely. That's so right. Yeah. Respect.
That should be there. That should be there no matter what, right?
You know what I find interesting? If you look in the animal kingdom, it's the males that are full of colors, and the peacocks have got their big feathers, and the weaver birds have to build the nests. But in humanity, it's the other way around. The women are the ones dressing up and doing all the stuff. It's going to be interesting if men walked around with makeup on and high heel shoes.
Totally.
They might have to at some stage.
The animals can teach us a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
It would be a big shift. Yeah.
Big shift.
Okay, so how do you work with couples? I know, Aaron, you did mention last time how you work, but Harsha, how do you work with the women and you do breathwork? What else do you do?
Yeah, in the plant medicine space, we facilitate couples, and in that we allow the medicine to do the work in that deeper part of them, and we just hold the space. We work. How we work with couples is we work with the individual, right? Usually what tends to happen, because like you had mentioned, it's not that common to see both the man and the woman in the relationship like at the same level of commitment to the work. There's usually like one who's a little bit more committed to begin and is like I want this change. And so what can tend to happen is we're working with one of the two, and in a way of getting them to work, but with the full intention that the work that we're doing with you is so that you can show up in your relationship in a way that then your partner then can maybe be inspired to take on the work in their own way. Knowing that we're available, then we become a catalyst. But what can tend to happen and where we're at, like I said, we're at the toddler stage of our business as a couple, is that partner who was more resistant just becomes more open to it. So far, the plant medicine space is where we're starting to see them wanting to be like, okay, like I can go here because I'm not relying on another person to like therapy me or anything like that. Like I get to just do my own work. Or they just go off and they find their own other space where they can go do some work. And so essentially, it's like we're still in the place of working with the individual where he's working with the men and I'm working with the women. They haven't yet fully come to us as a couple saying, hey, like here we are. This is what we were working with. So we're open and we're available for that work, but it hasn't yet landed in that way outside of the plant medicine space for us. And so that's something that we're exploring too. And but with the foundation, it really like how we've done our own, what we would do is just apply a lot of things we've learned and we've seen in these high caliber couples who we've learned from, is that it does always end up being the individual's journey for themselves, knowing that the love and the clarity and everything they get for themselves will directly impact then the relationship, and then we can work at it like that together and individually.
Yeah, essentially what happens is usually the individual that we're working with, either Harsha or I, becomes a light in that relationship. And oftentimes what happens is, especially because they end up, working on themselves within themselves and healing what they are experiencing, it sheds a light for the partner. And that's what Harsha mentioned, is that we've actually had couples after they've done some of the work has come together to sit together with the medicine, because it intrigues them to see where they can be more open. And then after they do the medicine, we actually see that they start to become more open to the work after that.
So what we've done then, like with our community that we have right now, right? So it's a membership. And if say one of the two in the couple signs up for it, the membership's actually open and available to both partners. So it's not like each of them has to get their own membership. They're under one. And what we've seen that tends to happen is one of the two is who shows up, but then we have recordings and they will then encourage their partner to tune into the recording. If it's like, they're like, oh, we had some insights, and that partner will then catch the recording at their own time. And so that's kind of how we've been working with couples, in that way of we're available and our work is available to both in the community. And we would love to see like both parts of the couple in there, but right now it's been kind of like one or the other, and then the work's infusing back to the other one.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned earlier in the call that you're seeing that, the women are stepping into this work a lot more than the men. And that's what we're seeing even within our community as well.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so glad that you're doing this work, Aaron, because men I've seen it firsthand where men tend to not listen to women as much as they listen to other men. And I mean, I was at a business conference, and one of the speakers couldn't arrive, and they had about 5,000 people in the audience. And there was a keynote speaker who was a woman, and they said to the organizer, "Let her speak." And he said, "No, I need a man." And I was like, wow, because she wasn't just anybody. But again, that was South Africa, and it's a lot different. They're also a very patriarchal society, but even then, men seem to look down on each other as men if they had been listening to another woman speak. And that needs to shift.
Yes.
That's why I asked you about the 4B movement, because I think we've all got, as you said earlier, we've got masculine and feminine qualities. And, to say one is lower than the other, or one is less relevant than the other, I mean, that's like saying half of you isn't relevant.
Exactly.
Totally. And in the space of especially relationship, is like that seems to be where we're seeing the biggest breakdown, right? Like intimacy and connection is what we are all driven for, but that's where the break is happening most apparently in the world. And so we're gonna hit a breaking point. Maybe we've already hit it, I would say. And so what can happen, what we've seen is that in the space of relationship, like women actually really have a potential to hear a man speak on a topic that they wouldn't be listening to their own partner speak about it. But because this other person's talking, they can receive that information and go, oh, right, oh, right, oh, yeah. And then maybe, oh, my husband has said that, my boyfriend has said that, and now they're getting it. And even the other way around, because men do want to have at their core a partner that they can feel connected to, because they're not listening to their partner. When enough women step into their power and get on those stages and talk to those men, they may be saying the very thing that those men's partners were saying to them, but now they're receiving it. So there is this crossover dynamic that can happen and is possible in the world that I'd love to see. And then obviously, right, women speaking to women and men speaking to men on the topics that only that can happen and needs to happen in that space. But there's we can play so much here in this field of relationship, and I can't wait to see it really come to life.
Yeah. Okay, so where can people get hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find us on Instagram as the best point of contact. Our community is at revive_your_life, and for our personal, it's _Aaron Sosa, and for Harsha, it's Harsha Sosa Empowered.
And then our website is www.revive-yourlife.com.
I'll post all those links below.
Thank
Do you have a final message for us before you go?
Love, love, love. Come back to love. Just come back to love.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was awesome chatting to both of you. I think you've got something really amazing going there. So keep it up. I'd love to see how it evolves and flourishes into a full-grown adult.
Yes. Thank you.
And hopefully goes more out into the world. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for your space.
Stay well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.